Makes a tackle, 10, 5, Boerigter!
Boerigter makes the catch! It's a foot race! Marc Boerigter breaking away! Touchdown!
Run 40-yard dashes.
Marcus Dash.
40-yard dash.
Marcus Dash.
40.
Marcus Dash.
Marcus Dash.
40-yard dash.
Marcus Dash.
You run the 40. Marcus Dash.
Welcome back to Running the 40. I'm your host, Marcus Dash. This week, we are talking to former NFL and CFL wide receiver Marc Boerigter. He had a hell of a career rising through the football ranks, going to the CFL, and then going on to play in the NFL with quarterbacks Trent Green, Peyton Manning, and Brett Favre. We talk about all things Chiefs and the Patrick Mahomes effect on NFL players taking less money to play with him in Kansas City, and the possible impact COVID-19 will have on smaller schools. Give it a listen. Hey everybody, I'm here with former Kansas City Chiefs standout, also Green Bay Packer, Indianapolis Colt, Marc Boerigter. Marc, how the hell are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well. You know, just navigating the crazy times that we're in like everybody else at this point. So, obviously it looks like the NFL is going to go forward here, and still waiting here in Kansas City to see what the decision is going to be on some fall high school sports here over the next couple of days. So we've got our fingers crossed on that side of things. You know, we're unique in Kansas City that the old state line runs right down the middle of Kansas City Metro here. So I got a daughter that goes to high school on the Kansas side, who's going to be a sophomore and playing volleyball. And then my wife is the head volleyball coach at Notre Dame DeSion High School over on the Missouri side and stuff as well. So we're a little bit of a house divided in terms of, potentially one could be playing fall sports here this fall and one could not. So, it's a little unnerving times here as we get going through things, but, overall things are well for sure.
That's good, man. That's great to hear. I mean, obviously it'll be a better year for you in the fact that, one will actually, one sports may not be going, so you only have one sport to go to. That's not bad. Not a bad problem to have.
Not bad at all. It'll alleviate a lot of the chaos that is normally our household in the fall for sure on weekends.
Yeah, and I was telling you beforehand, it's an honor to have you on the show. As a kid, huge fan, obviously, of the Kansas City Chiefs. I collect jerseys, Chiefs jerseys specifically, and for the longest time, I've been looking for a Marc Boerigter jersey. And you watch Arrowhead Pride always tweets out the random jerseys they'll see at training camp. And somebody had a Marc Boerigter jersey, I think last year or 2 years ago. Every time it's a Boerigter jersey, it always gets highlighted. So I've been looking for it for the longest time. I want to find one that's in my size. I'm a men's small, I'm a medium. So finding one of those is tough. So I'm on Poshmark the other day, and I see someone bought a Chiefs jersey. It didn't say Marc Boerigter, it said number 85 Chiefs jersey. So that was also the problem I was having. I couldn't find, I would type in Boerigter, it wouldn't come up. So I see this jersey's up, and I see someone bought it for the Super Bowl, and I comment on it, and I'm like, I have to have this jersey. The girl's like, well, I only bought it for the Super Bowl, so if you really want it that bad, I'm like, yes, I'll take it. I'll pay double the amount you pay for it. And I paid $50 for this jersey. Very happy with it. Got this bad boy right here. See this thing right there.
I like
right
it.
there, baby. Right there.
It's not worn out either. That's good. Somebody's had that in safe storage over the last few years for sure.
Perfect. It's perfect condition. So great for the fall season coming up here. And that's something I do want to talk about. Let's kind of jump in right here. And I see you still rep KC. Look at your shirt right there. So
absolutely.
So as most people know, you spent a better part of your career in Kansas City. What was it kind of like seeing us win the Lombardi this past year?
Well, it was fantastic, first of all, right? It's been 50 years since this organization did it, and being a former player and still being involved with the organization through the Chiefs ambassadors, through the alumni over the past several years, it was tremendous just to be a part of the ride. And I've been doing the pregame show here for the last 10 years for Sports Radio 810 for the Kansas City Chiefs, and enjoyed my time doing that. And every year we talk, and since Andy Reid's been here specifically, about this team taking the next step and what's that next step going to be. And, a year or so ago when they lost in the AFC Championship game here at home against the Patriots, it looked like that may be the year that they were going to get over the hump and go to the Super Bowl. Obviously, we know what happened with D Ford lining up off sides and the interception and everything else. We don't need to bring up those old wounds, but we can now. We can now because they're world champions. And so it was a tremendous run last year. The city was nuts about it. The level of excitement here in Kansas City has not wavered one bit, even through, this coronavirus pandemic that we're dealing with right now. It's taking the wind out of the sails a little bit, I think, of the anticipation. Like, it's taking the wind out of sails everywhere on things for this upcoming season. But at the same time, being a part of this organization, I couldn't be happier for the Hunt family, for the organization in general, and for the city of Kansas City, who's waited, obviously 50 years for this to happen. And
one thing I do want to ask is, when you played with Trent Green was great. We all love Trent. I got the bobblehead behind me right now. Love Trent. How badly would you have wanted to play with Patrick Mahomes?
Badly. You just watch this offense and watch his caliber as a player, and every single game, he does something else that amazes you, and just to talk about how early on in his career he is right now with the different arm angles he throws from and the strength of his arm. And I think just overall, Marcus, when you look at this, the offenses have opened up so much more now than what they were even when I was playing. And we were in a pretty wide open offense, don't get me wrong, in terms of attacking the field vertically and horizontally in the passing game and getting 4 or 5 guys out in the routes every single time. That was our mentality. And it was great and exciting to play when I played with this piece. But you watch this kid's talent, and you mentioned Trent Green. Trent Green was an underrated quarterback in terms of his arm strength, his ability, and he fit our offense perfectly. But the things that they're able to do with Patrick Mahomes, you just can't duplicate it. And a lot of it is, I liken it back to a little bit of backyard football from the standpoint that you have structure in your route concepts, knowing this offense and being around it now and watching some of it. They've got structure within their route concepts, but then there's also freedom to, and I don't want to use the term freelance, but freedom to, as Andy Reid likes to say, let your personality show a little bit out there. Mm-hmm. And he allows those guys to do that, and they're all on the same page. And as long as you're on the same page from the quarterback, receiver, tight end position, you can do that. And they've molded all these weapons in around him with Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce now getting a new extension and Sammy Watkins being in that mix. And, the list can go on and on with McCole Hardman and other guys that have adapted into this offense. They're all on the same page. Right now we're not even looking at a quarterback in the prime of his career yet, right? It's only entering the 3rd year as being a starter. And he's been the MVP of the league and the MVP of the Super Bowl. And talent-wise, from a receiver standpoint, I would love to play in this offense. Just absolutely love to play in it. And I think the other thing with it is that this team is unselfish. They realize that those weapons realize that they're going to get enough touches and enough targets their direction overall, but everybody's going to benefit within this offense, and it's all because of number 15.
Yeah, for sure. And you see that in with Sammy Watkins taking the pay cut to stay, and that's also kind of leads me to my next question. And as the years go on, right, we see Travis Kelce got his new contract. Tyreek Hill re-signed last year. McColl's still on his rookie deal. But do you see, as we go forward with Patrick Mahomes and kind of see the legend that becomes like that he's not in his prime yet, right? So as he becomes this guy, hopefully he'll continue to get better and better and better. Do you think we'll start to see more of these like veteran types of receivers coming to Kansas City for a 1 or 2 year contract and taking these kind of small deals just to play with them and get their rings? Like kind of like what we saw in basketball with teams going to play with guys going to play with LeBron just to win a ring. Do you think we'll kind of see that kind of happen in KC?
Yeah, I can see that happening. I certainly can. Now, this team is going to be built here with salary cap ramifications over the next couple of years and have to rely on drafting well, right, with Brett Veach and everything else there. But I could certainly see a scenario, though, where you get some guys that come in on a 1 or 2 year deal potentially to want to play. And anytime you've got a player of his caliber, you see that around the league. You always have. And I don't think it's necessarily so much on the offensive side too, but I think you're going to see it on the defensive side of the football as well, because you've got a situation where obviously you're defending Super Bowl champions at this point, but that you've got Patrick Mahomes locked in to a long-term deal. You've got some of these other weapons locked into long-term deals. So it's going to be an opportunity for guys, even on the defensive side, to say, hey, I may go there and take a 1 year deal because it's an opportunity for me to play for a ring, knowing they've got a franchise quarterback. And as long as he's quarterback in this team, I've got a shot to potentially win a world championship every year. So I think it's twofold. I think, number one, you will see that on the offensive side, whether it's an offensive lineman or wide receiver or potential running back in some scenario. But I also look at that from both sides of the ball, a defensive side as well, that you're going to get some guys that may be 1 or 2 year plug and play type of veterans that are going to want to come here because of the attractiveness of the situation.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how everything unfolds. You know, we'll be hamstrung by our salary cap and with our contracts that we have, but I mean that we have a talent like that that'll attract guys to come in, forget about salary for a year or two to try to get a ring. So I can't wait to see how that unfolds. So we're going to go to kind of college football. You know, as a former Division II and D3 football player, I transferred around a little bit. Seeing a guy like you as an NAIA player, you know, growing up, I watched the Chiefs. I was, you know, I loved it. You know, an encyclopedia with Chiefs, knowing that you went to Hastings College, right? As what guy of Northern Virginia knows Hastings College? The NAIA actually postponed the championships, so they're going to let some teams kind of go with the regulations and play out in this fall, and then playoffs will be taken in the spring. What are your thoughts on the NAIA's decision to go with that?
Well, I think in the environment we live in right now, it's difficult, right? And you know, my father spent, you know, close to 30, 40 years in athletics as an athletic administrator and athletic director, and was AD at Northwest Missouri State here, obviously national powerhouse in the Division II level of football. I then served as the commissioner of the MIAA conference, you know, at the end of his career before retiring. And so I've got some experience and somebody to lean on when you asked me this question about, you know, about moving sports to the spring. And I also spent time working at the NAIA national office here for about 3 years as well. I think it's this. I think you start looking at the overall health and safety of individuals and bringing kids back on campus. In the climate we're in, there's just so much that's unknown, right? And it's a difficult decision that high schools are looking to have to make now of risk versus reward and the mental health of kids and letting them play. You know, in the NAIA's case, they're moving their championships to the spring. NCAA Division II has done that as well. But there's also no guarantee here in January, February, March of next year, 7-8 months from now, that we're not going to be in the same situation. So I think it's a situation you got to kind of figure out how to navigate it. And you got to kind of figure out how to test it, because if you're not going through with any sports at all in the fall here, how do you test it? Now, that being said, Hastings College, as you brought up, where I went to school, they play in the Great Plains Athletic Conference. Their conference is going forward with football this fall and fall sports. The Heart of America Conference right here in Kansas City, NAIA schools in the region between Kansas City, a little bit of Nebraska and Iowa, is going forward with football as well and fall sports. So we're going to see how this is going to work out, you know, in a couple ways when you start looking at things. But it's a difficult decision to make. I'm glad I'm not in athletic administration where I have to make that decision, you know, what's in the best interest. In the NCAA Division II case, it was the new protocols and mandates that came out from the NCAA that forced the Division II to say, hey, we got to move this to spring, because it was not cost effective at all. In fact, it would bankrupt some of these schools to get these kids tested 3 times a week. Yeah. Just in order to participate. And so there's a lot that goes into it. It's a sad time. It's a sad deal, but it's just the nature of what we're living in right now. And, you know, I'm concerned myself, if we don't have high school sports here in the state of Kansas or in the state of Missouri, about the mental health of these kids, because it's not just about going to school. It's about their overall well-being. And, you know, these kids are going to find a way to play, specifically at the high school level. I know we're talking about college here, but they're going to find a way to go play somewhere. Now, football's a little different story. You can't just go play club football, right? But your volleyballers, your soccers, your baseballers, you know, if you're not playing, they don't go forward with fall football here at a high school level in the state of Kansas. Those 2-sport athletes that play baseball are just going to go play fall baseball, and they're going to do it. And so at some point we've got to learn to kind of navigate it and test this out, but somebody's got to be the guinea pig. And unfortunately, we're not talking about, you know, some little administrative piece. We're talking about a pandemic that, you know, potentially could kill people, right? So it's a difficult deal. It's disappointing that there's not going to be some college football. It looks like we may get some college football at the Division I level this year too. Yeah. But we don't know yet, right? We still don't know. And that's the unsettling part of it.
Yeah, and I know, like you said, on the high school aspect, I know I'm in Northern Virginia. My brother's a football coach here, and their quarterback, who's getting looked at by D1 schools, he has his uncle who lives in Florida. He's going to Florida to play high school football, you know? So, I mean, you're seeing a lot of these kids transfer either to private schools or just going out of state and just going to finish their high school career somewhere just so they can play. So there's that alternative for high school football. But again, it's a question mark as to it's the unknown still. So these conferences can plan their schedules now, but who knows what's actually going to happen at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
So for the D1 guys, as you mentioned, some of the conferences who aren't playing, you got the Big Ten, who's kind of the big one, Big Ten and Pac-12 are the ones who aren't playing in the fall. Do you see how this is going to kind of impact the NFL draft coming up? I mean, because you got to imagine some of these seniors won't risk getting injured to play in the springtime if they're getting ready for the draft in April. They said they can move the draft around, but I mean, there's guys who skip the bowl game because they don't want to get injured for the draft. I mean, do you think that's going to happen? I mean, will you see a lot of juniors or seniors just not play in the spring if there is spring football for the D1 level?
I think if there's spring football, I think you're going to see that. We already saw a couple kids already opt out. The kid that's a defensive back at Virginia Tech, right, that already opted out earlier. Going to be a top prospect. I think you're going to see that from some of the top prospects, especially if it's in the spring. They may look at it and go, okay, they're going to consult with the people and get their draft grades and get all that off of what they did their junior year, and then have to make that decision on what they want to do. I can tell you this, the NFL may be willing to move their draft a little bit, but they're not going to move it. They already had to go virtual this year, right, with it. And there's so many logistics that come into play with the NFL draft now, with them moving it to other cities, to hotel rooms and everything else that goes into all of that, that I don't see them just moving the draft unless it's going to go back to a virtual draft again like they did a year ago. If it's physically still going to be at a city, and I'm trying to remember where it's at this coming year. I know it was supposed to be in Vegas last year, and they moved it. It's supposed to come to Kansas City here in a couple of years, maybe in Cleveland, I think. But anyway, regards to that, though, they're not going to move their draft that much to accommodate it, And if these schools at the NCAA Division I level, the FBS schools, if you will, start playing in January or early February, there's still going to be some time to evaluate those guys. But I would not be surprised to – remember, you also got the NFL Combine that happens the end of February. I could see them moving the Combine more than the draft. But what do these guys do? Do they play, half their season if their team doesn't look like they're going to be in the mix for a national championship? Do they bow out halfway through? Or do they just take that route where they don't play? I think you're going to see quite a few kids that do that. Each one has to make their own decision on what they feel is best for them. Some will make the wrong decision because they think they're going to be drafted higher than they already are, or those guys that come out early every year that don't even get drafted. But it remains to be seen what that's going to happen. Again, we're still living in this unknown, but I certainly could see it happening, especially these teams from the Big Ten, the Pac-12, et cetera, that have already pushed off, to potentially play in the spring.
Yeah, because you have to imagine a lot of these guys don't even play in the bowl games just because they don't want to get hurt. And that's just one game, let alone the whole season, right?
Yeah, and this is all a trend and this is the other piece of that too. You just mentioned it with the bowl games. We've seen that trend over the last several years, right? That never used to be the case. Mm-hmm. We never used to see that. The only guys would not play in a bowl game is because they knew they were coming out for the draft and didn't go to class in the fall, so they were ineligible to play in the bowl game, right? That was basically it. Otherwise, now it's guys are looking at it going, okay, I want to make money. I want to go to the NFL. I want to preserve and do not want to get hurt. And it all probably started when Willis McGahee blew out his knee, for Miami back in the day on all that stuff. And obviously he went on to have a good NFL career anyway. But those types of things happen. And guys are, again, back to the risk reward, are going to weigh what that risk is for them. And if you've got the opportunity, especially if you're a top prospect, to be a first rounder, there's millions of dollars on the line for you.
Yeah, for sure. And there's a question that I want to ask you as a person who – you went undrafted. You played in the CFL. With this year, when the NFL kind of amended the regular season this year and how things are going to be played out, no preseason. Could you have imagined an NFL career without a preseason?
As not as a rookie, okay, not as a rookie by any means. Once I became a veteran, I could see that. No preseason games. It's going to be difficult for guys to show what they can do, and it's not so much necessarily about the preseason games to me. It's about that this has been a unique offseason that those undrafted guys would normally have a rookie mini camp. Then they would have a mini camp. Then you'd go through your OTAs, which is your organized team activities, throughout the first part of the summer. Then have about a month off and then go to training camp. So they've missed probably about 25 to 30 extra practices or times that they could really show, not in pads, of course, at this point for those activities, but show what they can do, right, in an athletic setting, how they're picking up the offense, things like that, that all garner you more time in training camp, that all garner you more time in preseason games to get a look at by your coaches, and then not just for your current organization that you're at, but potentially for other teams around the league to look at you. And that's the big thing to me, that having a couple of these preseason games, or all of them in this case, canceled, is that it's not so much about those games for those kids, but also the opportunity that they've had all summer. They haven't been able to show what they can do. And so their opportunities are going to be even more limited. And especially now when you don't have 0 preseason games, we all know that in the first couple of preseason games, it used to be, back when I played, starters would play like a drive and then be done. Now we're starting to see some of these guys and your elite players not playing hardly at all in the preseason, or only playing one game or only a quarter in a game, things like that. But now going into training camp here, you're not getting guys ready as a whole. If you're Andy Reid and you look at the Kansas City Chiefs, I think they're at an advantage, first of all, because they've got so many guys coming back from a year ago. Yeah. And they haven't had an off season, which I think is an advantage to them. But second of all, you're worried about getting your starters ready to play, and your top draft picks up to speed, and your free agents up to speed. Not some of your undrafted guys or your lower round draft picks. Those guys are just going to end up on the practice squad at this point. They're not even going to have necessarily an opportunity to make the opening roster, because you don't have any preseason games. You hit September, that first game, it's live, right? It counts for something. And so you're worried about getting those guys ready to play and your team ready to play, to come out of the gate to start the season well, as opposed to trying to bring these guys up. So you're starting to see some of these teams in training camp now a little bit doing some kind of split squad stuff so they can get more of these younger guys some reps. But it's definitely a disadvantage for them this year.
Yeah, and I was talking to actually former teammate of yours, Eric Warfield, a couple weeks ago, and he was just saying that the first 4 games of this year, that's regular season. That's regular season and preseason all into one for the guys, the top rookies who are going to be playing, getting some playing time. I mean, that's going to be their first action. It's not a game that doesn't count. It's going to be real. It's a real deal. So it's going to be interesting to watch for a guy like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, for example. First carry is going to be week 1 of the NFL season in prime time. So that's going to be interesting to watch. The question I always had, after you left Kansas City, you went from Trent Green to playing with, let me see what I got the order correct. You went to Brett Favre and then Indianapolis, or is it Indianapolis then Green Bay?
No, it was Green Bay first and then Indianapolis. Yep.
Okay. So what did you learn from being able to play with Trent Green, Brett Favre, and Peyton Manning? What was kind of some stories you have of those three legends at quarterback?
Well, really good quarterbacks, obviously, right? 2 Hall of Famers and Trent on stuff. But yeah, I left Kansas City as an unrestricted free agent and went to Green Bay in 2006 and was there pretty much the entire offseason and through a little bit of training camp, through a couple preseason games. And, of course, that was Aaron Rodgers' second year there, behind Brett Favre. The only Brett Favre story I've got that's a good one, I guess, is during practice and during training camp that year in 2006 when I was there. I was running a curl route, and Brett threw it about 11, 12 feet in the air to me, okay? And it was an absolute bullet. And, of course, I decided to jump up and try to get it. And it came right off the tip of my finger right here and broke my finger, okay? And so I knew I had to get it x-rayed afterwards and stuff. And I was in the x-ray room coming out, and he walks around in the training room and says, "Well, what's the story?" And I just had a small little hairline fracture in it. And he looked at it and said, "Man, I'm getting old. I used to shatter those things," is what he said, type of thing. And we all laughed about it. And he was a great guy and enjoyed my time, obviously, in Green Bay. It didn't work out for me to make the team there. I was cut like on a Thursday or maybe a Tuesday. I was on a plane the next morning out of Green Bay at 6 a.m. to go to Indianapolis and played in a preseason game basically 2 days later. Down in Mississippi against the Saints. And so it was a whirlwind for me a little bit, and then got released right at the end of the preseason with Indianapolis. But just being around those guys, and this goes for Trent, Brett. Brett was obviously a character in his own right on stuff, but the amount of detail that those guys spent on stuff, and things. And in Green Bay, it was a little bit different for Brett, I think, that year, because that was Mike McCarthy's first year as a head coach. So there were some changes to the system. It was still the same system, but, Mike was adapting some of the verbiage to what they've done in the past, even though it's the same route concept of the West Coast offense and getting all those things put together to what Brett felt comfortable with on stuff than the other two situations for sure. But their attention to detail throughout practice and also being coaches on the field and what they liked and what they were reading and things. And I was always a big concept guy. I've mentioned it several times, you know, in terms of how I learned. And I knew every position from a wide receiver standpoint and you know, being a smart wide receiver. And when I say smart, you saddle up to the quarterback and understand what he's thinking, right? You talk to him. You don't just demand the football. You ask what they're looking at, what they want out of you, so that you present yourself, you know, more opportunities to potentially get the football. And so just sitting around and picking those guys' brains on things. And Peyton was this way too. He was tremendous in terms of his preparation, even in the preseason. When you looked at things, he treated everything in the preseason like it was the regular season. So blessed to have been able to catch, you know, balls in a game from Trent. Caught a couple balls in a preseason game from Aaron Rodgers, but just being able to practice and catch footballs from two Hall of Famers is not a bad thing at all, even in practice.
For sure. Do you see a lot of the similarities that people say that Mahomes is like a Brett Favre, is like an Aaron Rodgers? Do you see, I mean, playing with those two dudes, do you kind of see the
similarities there? Yeah, I do. You know, that was the big thing with Mahomes coming out of Texas Tech, right? The knock was his footwork and his mechanics, but he was a gunslinger like Brett Favre and can throw it. And Aaron Rodgers has a tremendous arm too. I think this is one thing that people don't always realize too. As a receiver, you recognize quarterback talent pretty quickly, right? In terms of when the ball's on time, the anticipation, things like that. And then catching the football, the zip on the ball, and what the ball is like when it's coming at you, because quarterbacks throw a different style of ball. You can have a guy that's throwing it, if you put a radar gun on them, they're throwing the same speed. But some quarterbacks, you know, let's go to baseball as an example, spin rate, right? In terms of fastballs, curveballs, sliders, things like that. Some quarterbacks have more revolutions of the football when it's coming in. So it's coming in tighter. It's a lot softer to catch. And some, it just seems like a heavy ball. And so, you know, when you look at these guys on that and you start comparing it to Patrick Mahomes, I see a lot of the similarities in terms of his arm strength. But then I think you're starting to see the evolution. And Aaron Rodgers was always this way with Green Bay, and I saw this in practice when I was there. It was all about his footwork. And it wasn't that it was always the best footwork. It was just he always put his body in positions to make the throw how he needed to make the throw for what worked for him. And I think you're seeing Patrick Mahomes do that as well, with the low arm slots and just the way he throws with his footwork. You know, Trent was much more mechanical. Peyton was much more mechanical. That's just what worked for the way their mechanics were, what worked best for them in terms of how they threw the football, in terms of their athleticism. But, yeah, there's some definite similarities watching Patrick Mahomes play and there are. And I think you're starting to see just from the mental side of things for him too, that as he continues to learn and understand what defenses are doing to him, it's only going to, you know, if he can raise his level of play, it's only going to get raised at this point.
Yeah, and it was on that HBO show where he said he's just starting to learn defenses, and it's like, what? You've won a Super Bowl, and you know you're just starting to read defenses properly. It's insane. The guy's insane. And I'm glad that KC finally has him after years. You know, I wouldn't say poor quarterback play, but you know, not Patrick Mahomes. You know, it's
well, and I think the other thing with it is they've drafted this guy, right? You know, Trent was a free agent. Alex Smith was a fine quarterback when he was here. Right. And it's great. By the way, it's great to see him back and getting cleared to play after his horrific injury and stuff too. Yeah. That's fantastic. Everybody in Kansas City is happy to see that because he was such a great guy and a great leader. Did his thing. He was just, you know, he's a different style of quarterback. And I think that's the one thing with Patrick Mahomes here too now is that this is, quote, a homegrown guy that they drafted and have developed, and they hit it out of the park with this one for sure. Yeah,
and I think it also speaks to you know playing to the strengths. I think Andy Reid's done a great job, and he's always done that. You know, with Kevin Cobb, McNabb, he's always done the playing to the strengths. And I think in this modern age, he's kind of taken a lot of the air raid systems that have been in the Big 12 for so long, and you know you've seen aspects of that. But now he's kind of embraced that and kind of added his little spice to it, you know, and that's what he's done with Patrick. I think it's awesome, you know. As a Big 12 football fan myself, I loving the high-scoring offense. It's fun to see that we have that with our squad now. So I think that's
what the other thing with Andy, I think on it that I think, and you hit it on the head, is if you want to call it college concepts, air raid concepts, right, whatever, however you want to look at it. But it's understanding what your players do well, right, and what makes them comfortable. And because when you start getting down to route trees and different things, a lot of the concepts in the passing game are all the same. They've just evolved over the years. Maybe it's getting more guys out in routes, some different concepts, possibly in there, but it's all a copycat league, and everybody copies off each other. And these NFL coaches are calling college coaches to understand their offenses and vice versa as it goes. But you're adapting to the personnel you have. And I think that's a sign of a great coach, and specifically when you talk about Andy, because over the years, so much has been talked about when these quarterbacks come out from the draft is, well, he's not really a pro-style quarterback, right? He's played in this wide open spread offense. How's he going to take snaps under center? Well, look around the NFL, during Peyton Manning's last years in Denver, he wasn't under center all that much. They ran a lot out of the shotgun, right, and different stuff. It's how the game has evolved and how these coaches are evolving to get out of somewhat of their narrow mentality that they have in their head sometimes on this is the way it needs to be done, this is the way we've always done it, to looking at it and saying, okay, here's what our talent is. What can we do to maximize that talent? And it may be you have to grow as a coach. And Andy Reid's been able to adapt to that over the years. Yeah,
and it's what you said, like how he kind of plays to every quarterback's strength, and he knows his quarterback's strengths. I mean, whether it was Kevin Cobb, whether it's Bobby Hoying. I mean, you go back into the Eagles days.
Mm-hmm.
He was winning games with guys you probably wouldn't win with other teams, And the Kevin Cobb example was great. He ended up trading him for a second-round pick, and I don't think he panned out in Arizona, but that's what Andy does. He's a quarterback whisperer.
He is, for sure. He is.
So, okay, we're going to go to the final, the lightning round portion, which is the final 40-yard dash. The show's running the 40 with Marcus dash, so it's the final 40 right here. We ask all of our guests. The first question is, what was your fastest 40-yard dash?
The fastest I can remember, I ran a 4.42 at my individual pro day, coming out of Canada after the 2001 season. So I had a private workout in Salt Lake City, Utah. I had like about 24 teams that were interested in me at the time. And instead of taking a bunch of different visits around the country and working out everywhere, I decided to go kind of the individual combine route. And we had like 19 teams in attendance. And coming out of a small school, of course, I really didn't have great times or quality times that had been timed on me because I hadn't done a ton of stuff on individual workouts. I went to a regional combine coming out of college that I ran a 4.43 at. And then I ran a 4.42 in front of some general managers, of course, and directors of personnel in Salt Lake City. And so, 4.42 is my 40 time.
Damn, 4.42, and you're 6'5", right? Or 6'4", 6'5"?
Yeah, 6'3", 6'4", yeah, right in there at 220 pounds. Yep,
Jeez.
At the time.
Man, that's like a top 3 round grade nowadays. It should be, at least.
It should be, for sure, yeah.
So, next question. Who was the defender guarding you during your 99-yard touchdown versus San Diego?
I don't remember who was lined up on me, but Rogers Beckett was the safety that I got behind. He's the one that always shows up in the highlights for sure.
He was the defender. I think they were playing zone coverage, and that was who went through his zone. So, Rogers Beckett. Okay, next we're going to go a little CFL route. During the 2000 and 2001 seasons with the Calgary Stampeders, you scored 19 receiving touchdowns, which in that 2-year span was only second to what receiver on that team?
I think the natural answer would be to say Alan Pitts, but he was only there, not many people outside the CFL maybe know who Alan Pitts was, but he's at the time was the all-time leading receiver in CFL history. But I played 1 year with him. He was kind of my mentor in year one. But I think Travis Moore is probably the answer. We had a really good receiving corps. My rookie year, we had 4 guys go over 1,000 yards.
Oh, my God.
That I was in on the receiving corps with Vince Danielson, myself, Travis, and then Alan Pitts in year one. Then year two, we didn't have as great a statistical year on stuff, but Vinny was still there and Travis was there. Travis was really our number one guy and big play guy. So I'll go with Travis. I don't know if that's right or not, but
yeah, Travis Moore edged you out by 2. You had 21. You had 19. That
gotcha.
So besides being from a small school, what is some other type of adversity that you overcame to make it in the NFL? I know this is kind of a question I've been asking a lot of players, that overcame adversity. And, you came from Hastings College. And, I mean, at what point were you like, I'm actually going to try to make it to the NFL or the CFL? I mean, coming from a small school like that, I went to D2, D3 school. I remember asking when I was a freshman, asking the guys, the top dogs on the team, like, how serious were you about trying to go to the pros? And some would be like, I'm going to try. But like, you could tell they weren't like as dedicated about that. That's once you dedicate yourself to doing that, you all in. And, you obviously did that. So what was kind of the adversity besides being from a small school that kind of like, that either helped you drive to making the pros, or just kind of like all the things you had to overcome?
I got you. Well, I think the thing for me was, from a small school, I knew I was going to have an opportunity because we had some pro scouts through. And we had a guy by the name of Jerry Drake, who was a defensive tackle, played like 9 years in the NFL. Most of those were the Arizona Cardinals, that actually came from Hastings around 1993, 94. So we had some pro scouts coming through. I knew I was going to have an opportunity. I didn't know what that was going to look like. Long story short, we had some connections to some people in the CFL through our staff at Hastings who made some calls about me. I got a call from Calgary like on a Tuesday and said, we're having a free agent tryout camp in Dallas, Texas on Saturday. Can you be down there? It's invitation only. So I drove 9 hours with my father down on Friday to work out. And really for me, it was about, and it obviously went well because I got a call on the following Monday or Tuesday to sign. And so I did. For me, it was about, my mentality was I thought I could play at a higher level, but I didn't know until I got there, right, type of thing. And then got to CFL training camp, did fantastic throughout the camp. My first catch as a pro in the preseason, I took the ball like 40 yards for a touchdown, my first reception. And once I got up there, I knew I could play. And then it was about taking the next step to the NFL. And the adversity piece that I had here, I lucked out because Tony Gonzalez was holding out. And I talked earlier about all those OTAs and off-season pieces that I got plugged into a lot of his routes through all our OTAs and minicamp because he wasn't there. And that helped me understand the scope of the offense, but it also helped me show what I can do. And then I think the biggest thing for me, my rookie year in 2002, was I got appendicitis like the third day of training camp. And so I was running routes, and I remember our receivers coach was a Hall of Famer, and Charlie Jordan coming up to me and asked me what was wrong. And I was like, I got this pain in my stomach. I didn't know if I'd pulled something or what the deal was in my abdomen area. Got checked out afterwards and got my appendix out that night in Minneapolis, Minnesota, because, of course, our training camp was in River Falls, Wisconsin, like 45 minutes away. So I missed basically every single preseason game except the final one.
Jeez.
And so, again, for me, going back to everything I had done in OTAs and minicamp really set the stage for me to be able to make the team as a rookie because of all that. And so that type of adversity for me was, I went from, okay, I'm feeling really good about things and make this team, to the old adage, you can't make the club if you're in the tub type of deal. And it's not because I pulled a hamstring. It was because I had appendicitis and had to get my appendix out. So, and of course with that, couldn't have contact for 2 or 3 weeks and, everything else along with that. So that was a big thing for me. But I think in terms of overcoming that piece early on, and then of course I tore my ACL in 2004, and that's part of, what happens in playing football in the game. But I think for me, it was just a matter of proving myself at the next level. I always thought I could play, and my attitude going into it in Canada was, I'm going to give this every shot I have to play because I want to play football. And if it doesn't work out for me, I'll go get a normal job somewhere, right? And just move on and say, hey, it was a good run, and I had a great college career, and this is what it is. But it turned out to really be, 7-8 years of professional football from a small NAIA school. And I decided I went back to the CFL in 2007 to play. I still could have, went back to Calgary and then ended in Toronto, but still could have played up there if I wanted to. And I just kind of decided at the age of 30 at that point that, I've been through a lot. It's been a great run coming out of a small school, and overcame a lot just to get to where I was, to have that opportunity. And I made the most of it. And so I called it good at that point.
I think your story and your wisdom is like needed for a lot of these kids with morale being so low, with high school sports being canceled, seniors and juniors not being able to get that final year because some may not even have a spring season. So I think stories like this, I think, are really necessary to hear for a lot of these kids who, my brother coaches in high school and stuff. So I think they need to hear stories like this. So I think it's very, very encouraging to hear what you had to say and what you kind of went through, because, you may not have gone through the COVID, right, but you had your own adversity to go with. And I think that's
absolutely. Yep. Absolutely.
And that leads to my final two-part question right here. What advice do you have to the receivers who may not make it on an NFL roster by the end of training camp this year, and to the D2 and D3 players and NAIA players whose football seasons could be canceled if they do have a spring season, if they don't have a spring season? What's kind of your advice to all those people?
Well, I think my advice to them is, not every opportunity for you is the right opportunity, especially in the NFL. There's 30, if you're on one team, there's 31 other teams. Okay. So, and this goes back to not having preseason game or where it's a struggle is that, you got to keep fighting for your opportunity. And sometimes your opportunity is going to be with a different organization, a different system, and a different, coaching staff that may like you better. And when I say like you better, may feel like you fit in better to their system than your current situation. Sometimes you're just in a roadblock for those kids that may get cut this year, receivers or any other position in the NFL, but they're just other guys ahead of you that have been there, right? And a guy that, like how would you want to be a quarterback coming in right now getting drafted to be the backup for Patrick Mahomes, right? You're only one snap away.
Right.
But say you started at, a major Power 5 conference and you're like, I can play in this league, but I got drafted here in the 6th or 7th round. Where's my opportunity going to be? You never know when your opportunity is going to come up. And that's the thing with it is you got to stay with it, stay working hard, and just understand that your opportunity, probably is going to come, or give yourself every single opportunity. And then for, the kids that are out there, like for me, coming from a small school, as I mentioned before, I just wanted to keep playing. And so I saw this when my first year in Canada in 2000, that there are guys that had been in the NFL that came up there, and not a lot of people know this about the time they've since expanded some of the rosters, but there's a Canadian to, American ratio in terms of how many guys can be on the roster, right? That you can only put so many born guys on the roster, et cetera. So I came in basically fighting for one receiver spot with 10 other guys on the American side of things. Yeah. And I won that job. But you look at it and you say, okay, but there were so many guys that came up there with the attitude that were like, I'm just up here to get some film and then head back south to the league, right? Mm-hmm. And it's about making the most of the opportunity of where you're at that time. Because if you're good enough, they're going to find you. And if you make the most of that opportunity and are happy with what you're doing and accept your role on the team, you're going to be in good shape. And if, I obviously was successful in my first 2 years in Canada. If it didn't work out for me in the NFL, I was having a blast playing in the CFL. I could have played up there, forever and just spent my entire career up there. But fortunately, I got a chance to come to the league for 4 or 5 years and obviously made that opportunity because it was my ultimate dream once I knew I could play. But don't look down on any other opportunity that's out there, whether the XFL comes back or another spring football league comes back. You never know where those opportunities are going to be at. That could help you get to where you want to go. And even if you don't ultimately reach where you want to go, take advantage of that and still play as long as you can if you want to play. That's the piece to me that, like I said, I had 7-8 years. And after that, I was like, I've been cut, 4 or 5 times here down the stretch. It's time now that I want to walk away at 30. It's been a good run. It's because I came from a small school. But that fire is still burning in me today to play. It's everything. I know I can't do it at 42 right now, with my knees and everything else. But that fire never leaves you. So just play as long as you possibly can until you say, until somebody tells you it's time to hang it up, because that's ultimately, as athletes, the old, kind of dumb cliche is we die twice. We die once, we die when we die, but then the other time we die, the first time is after, our athletic career is over, because, it's going to end. Father time is undefeated for us. Right. And most guys don't get a chance to walk out on their own terms, And you can even look at that at the high school level, the kids that aren't going to play in college, or the college level, the kids that aren't going to go play at a professional level. You're told when your time is done. It's not your choice, right? Your eligibility is exhausted. You can't go play a 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th year at Hastings College if you wanted to. It's just not how it works, right?
Right.
And so you just got to make the most of those opportunities and enjoy the time you're there, because I get asked a lot, do I miss playing? Yeah, I miss playing, but I don't miss training camp. I don't miss the practices. I miss the day before games, and I miss the games, and I miss the locker room. That's the other piece. You miss the camaraderie with all the guys, and they're all the time.
Awesome, man. I really enjoyed that, especially, and I know a lot of these younger players that I can go back and show a lot of the high school football players in the area. Pretty much what you just said right there, everything you just said, and I think that's a lot of value in that. And I think at a time where morale is so low, I think understanding where you kind of – and I think a lot of what you say is enjoying the moment, Don't think about like, oh, yeah, like what you said, I'm going to play in CFL for a couple of years and then go back down, get my tape and go back down. Forget about that. Enjoy the moment, And I think a lot of these kids, if they do have a spring season, and I know that it's going to be a shortened season if they do have spring, and at least a high school round, 3 or 4 games. And enjoy the 3 or 4 games, You got to deal with the situations as they come. I think at the end of the day, it's what everyone's got to do.
It is, and when you start looking at the high school football and even the college level getting moved to spring, and these are unique times. Nobody in our generation has lived through a pandemic, right? We have not been through this before, and so it's uncharted territory, and it sucks. It sucks for a lot of ways. We all want to be able to watch college football on Saturdays. I want to be able to broadcast college football games like I've done the last 5 years on Saturdays. Can't do that this fall based on what's happening. But for these kids, it's not their fault. Obviously, this is happening. It just is a part of life that we're going through right now. And so if you do get the opportunity to play a couple games, make the most of those games. And if you don't, unfortunately, it just is what it is, and it sucks. And my heart goes out to them. And I want to watch high school football here in Kansas this fall. I'm scheduled to do some high school games here locally on TV. I've done the last year or so, and crossing my fingers, I'm going to be able to do that. And I just enjoy watching football and doing that. But if it goes away, it goes away. And we just have to understand that it's about, the greater peace for humanity right now and trying to keep everybody safe from this, just because there are so many unknowns right now. And that's the part that's awful, but it is what it is. It's just what the situation is right now. I think it's more important. How do we handle that situation moving forward and pressing forward with it?
Yeah, and I think a lot of the younger kids are going to benefit from this. They'll come out much stronger than like I said, no other generation has dealt with the pandemic, and so now I think this younger generation is going to come out tougher. I think Gen Z, millennials get a bad rap, and I think I think Gen Z is going to work out all right in this one.
They're much more adaptable. I'll say this: that generation's much more adaptable than my generation, or even people older than me, in terms of adapting to things. Right? I've seen it in my own kids. Like I said before, I'm worried about kids' mental health and everybody's mental health on this, but they're stronger than they think they are in terms of all this, and understand that we're all in this together. I think that's the other piece to this, that everybody's in this together, and we may not agree on either side of it in a lot of ways, but at the end of the day, we're all in it together. For
sure. Wise words from Marc Boerigter. Marc, thanks a lot for coming on, man. I plan on continuing to do this throughout the season. I don't know if you want to come on and talk some Chiefs shop with me during the season.
Yeah, absolutely. Hit me up. Hopefully we keep pressing forward, right, with the NFL season so far at this point. And, yeah, we can chop it up.
Awesome. I really appreciate it, buddy.
All right. Thanks, man.